And we're discussing the BBI report. Let's now pick the issues that have come out prominent. The fact that the proposal is for the president to appoint a prime minister. Basically, when these discussions, we were having this discussion prior to the BBI report, everyone was already fashioning their thoughts in a certain way. And we even thought there will be more powerful prime minister and a ceremonial president. Things turn around. And now, I know you don't agree with this, but there are calls. We need to rethink the position of prime minister as proposed in the BBI. Now, is that even a possibility, and why do you think there's that call for a little bit weakening of the presidential powers, Martha?
The presidential powers as currently constituted are not strong. I've said we do not test our systems enough. The president has appointed cabinet administrative secretaries. I think there is no place for that in the constitution, but nobody has gone to court, so it stays. We already have a sort of chief minister in the name of Fred Matiang'i because he's coordinating the ministers. It's nowhere in the constitution, you see. So what I think is that we create the powerful presidency because we don't question. We are even suggesting to the president that if a powerful prime minister is created, he could run again when it's in clear violation of the constitution because of the term limits. We are the responsible for creating an illusion. The presidency as it is not powerful. And if the prime minister is being suggested so as to be inclusive, the prime minister suggested by the BBI will be from the majority party. So the party with the president will still have the prime minister. So it's not for inclusion. And if that inclusion was needed, then you could have inclusion at the county level where the governor goes to the runner-up and then create something for them.
I agree with Martha that, under the current constitution, it is impossible really to have an imperial president. And then we had all these commissions, independent offices and commissions. These were also supposed to dilute presidential authority. All these appointments of Director of Public Prosecutions were really in the domain of the president to hire and fire. But I can tell you that without having a prime minister, because now it looks like we may have to go parliamentary to the extent that ministers are going to come from parliament, that means the executive is going to operate from parliament. Now, if you have a president who in any circumstances is the one who's going to determine who's going to be prime minister, I think that is wrong. And saying that it's going to come from a majority party, that's not good enough. The second thing that it is saying, that he can sack him, he can fire the prime minister.
Or the parliament can do it also.
Parliament can do on a motion of no confidence. But the president at all time can, whether or not he is a prime minister from a party which has the majority in the assembly or in the Senate or the parliament as a whole, the president can still do it. Now, I believe that the weakest link that we have in this process is the judiciary. For example, there was a matter that was taken to court in relation to the presidential powers of veto. The president now is making law through the back door. Now, this is something which, if you had a strong judiciary, it cannot happen. Now, because we are in this situation, the only way to limit presidential power and ensuring that we don't have an imperial presidency is that the powers of the executive must be distributed within organs within the executive. And I think the post of prime minister, unless the president himself was prepared, to exercise executive authority from within parliament, which is in South Africa basically is a parliamentary system, but quite often the president has to go to before
and face fire
and face parliament.
Yes.
No, but this in our system we have president somewhere up the hill.
What would be the ideal proposal, Senator? What would you propose in terms of if we were to get a prime minister? What would you think would be the ideal?
I think the ideal situation is to have a prime minister, but with powers which are clearly spelled out in the Constitution. Because in this proposal, it's as if even the Prime Minister has had to enjoy powers which are assigned to him
by the president.
By the president. Even cabinet committees, he's to be tasked
as part of his responsibility.
Yeah. And then they say, you know, his terms and conditions of service is
remain the same. Additional
same.
responsibility, but terms of service constant.
It doesn't really matter. And then you'll have a situation like Uganda where you're a prime minister, but you'll never know who that person is, because it doesn't matter really.
Okay, I'd like to know the mischief matter. What was the mischief with this creation of this post?
Let us remember that in Naivasha we debated whether we wanted to continue with a parliamentary system or we wanted to go to a purely presidential system. And we adopted the presidential system basically so that there could be separation of powers, so that legislature or parliament, which has oversight over the executive, is completely delinked from the executive. We have not completely gone by that suggestion, because in the last Jubilee government and in the current one, losers in the elections have been appointed to cabinet. Therefore, you are still having the political link.
Okay.
And I am not saying that even those in the technocrats may be without parties, but I'm saying we have not adhered to the envisaged whatever's of the parliamentary, of the pure presidential system. We have also seen the role of the leader of opposition, whose name now is leader of minority, being diluted, especially in this era of handshake, because the handshake has operated as a sort of an official coalition government, if you like.
Okay.
Therefore, you find that the leader of minority and minority members of parliament are defending the executive sometimes more than the members of the executive. So Kenyans need to know.
And by the way, that's not an old situation. You know, like in Israel, sometimes you're forced to have either coalitions.
But Kenyans need to know that it is not the name that maketh the opposition. The name for the opposition in this current system is minority. So the leader of the minority has an office in parliament, is facilitated so as to be able to gather their troops to oversight government.
Okay.
But
you see,
the failure is with our style.
The other thing, which we are forgetting most of the time, that the offices of leader, minority, and majority are subsumed by parliament as an institution. Parliament is supposed to be independent and separate. For example, the controller of the purse is supposed to be parliament. Parliament is the one which allocates, appropriates, and also authorizes, revenue, collection, and so on. Now you find by operation, Treasury actually is the owner of the purse.
And parliamentarians go to bed.
And Parliament goes to bed.
Okay.
Yeah. So because those systems are not working the way they were designed to do, you can't just let it stay the way it is.
Because that's the question I want to ask next, because having been involved in the process that produced the constitution we have, with hindsight, the two of you, do you think we were preoccupied with making the constitution to suit a certain group at that time that we failed to realize that this would be our mistakes? And we'll have to look back at it.
The problems we are experiencing now, we still experienced in a parliamentary system. You remember during the Moi era when parliament was a rubber stamp? And when they were being persecuted, James here and others were being persecuted for speaking out. So I want Kenyans to know that it is not a parliamentary or a presidential system that makes a strong institution. It's the caliber of the people who are elected.
Okay.
Right from the county assemblies, it is those people who will make a strong county assembly and will make strong oversight on the county government and make accountability the norm.
Okay.
The same with parliament. So for Kenyans, I would say this to each one of us as voters. We get what we sow.
Okay.
The caliber of leaders we elect, we've virtually killed our institutions. And for the judiciary, I will say this. just like for other government offices, ever since the arrival of the 2010 Constitution, we have consistently, what shall I say, consistently manipulated the appointment processes. Sometimes you pick the weaker person, or sometimes the panel is so skewed that they will inflate the scores of a particular individual. So we have some very good appointments and some terrible appointments.
Okay.
And that goes for all the institutions, for the executive, for the judiciary, for even the elective ones, for parliament.
Okay.
So we end up with whatever.
Let me ask you the same question I asked Senator here.
Yeah.
What would be the ideal, if you were to entrench the position of a prime minister, what would be the ideal kind of prime minister for you?
My ideal situation is not to touch the constitution at all, is to have a conversation on how to implement it so that it may serve us. Because I fear that even if we amend, with our kind of attitude, we go nowhere. So my starting point is the conversation.
The other problem that we need to address when we're discussing about the issue of prime minister is inclusivity.
Yeah.
And that goes to the point where mother may not be comfortable with it, that we are creating positions necessarily for the boys and the girls.
For the boys. There are no positions for the girls.
We should not be the case.
It's a boys' club.
But it's supposed to address the issues of inclusivity. But I think the bottom line, since the beautiful ones are not yet born, I mean, we'll never have a day when we can say, you know, we can invest on a particular individual to make sure that we don't have an imperial presidency. And to that extent, I think that is why these amendments are necessary, so that we can put parameters to ensure that anybody who occupies that office cannot go beyond certain lines.
Okay.
But I think
if you
just leave it to the voter, look at the rise of nationalism even in Europe. The kind of people who are ending up in offices, you know, Ukraine and all those places. You cannot guarantee that the ballot is going to ensure that you elect the best person.
Just like you cannot guarantee that any amendment will make sure that Kenyans follow what they agree. So my starting point is a conversation with ourselves.
Okay.
During the Moi era, we all believed that Moi was, not all of us, but a majority of Kenyans believed Moi was infallible. It took the joining of the opposition forces when Raila led a big chunk out of Kanu, and the group became too large and Kenyans saw it was possible. I am thinking that even now, because a lot of Kenyans mean well for this country, if the forces that want to see this country progress once again coalesced, we can have a national conversation that can help us get leadership that will implement this constitution. And no constitution is sacred. If after implementing, we feel that there are things we need to amend, once we have established a culture of the rule of law,
I take the opposite view, even going by elections. You know, and you have these experiences. You take a matter to the voters. You find like an angel like Wangari losing an election, and posthumously we think what a great woman she was.
That's
that's how.
Okay.
But if we have laws in place that will ensure whoever is elected. Because probably Martha will never be president.
Okay.
No, I'm going to be soon.
We need to take the last break.
I'll be soon.
When we come back, probably. When we come back, I'd like to touch on devolution. Devolution is also very key. And there are proposals about devolution that I need to get out of the way, because